Hello, and welcome to the Loop Marketing Podcast, where we explore the conversations shaping the future of marketing. I'm your host, Elise Stieferman, and today we're diving into one of the hottest and sometimes most polarizing topics in the industry, AI in marketing. So, joining me today for this conversation are two incredible voices at the forefront of AI in marketing. Savannah Westbrock, our VP of Innovation and Research at Coegi, and Summer Dubois, head of AI at Meet the People. So, together, we're going to debate the current reality of AI in marketing, share some practical examples of what we're seeing, and then walk through how AI is really reshaping the worlds of media, creativity, measurement, and the teams that fuel all those pieces behind it. So, thank you both for joining me today. I think all of us would agree that there's no shortage of hype around AI right now. And some say it's going to transform everything overnight for the better. And then others are really thinking that we're just scratching the surface and are a little bit afraid of where we're going. So, want us to do like a little bit of a reality check and debate on where we are today. Sav, I'll start with you. Are we overhyping or underestimating AI?
That's a fun question. Debate is also a fun word. I didn't realize I was signing up for a debate. I didn't bring my notes. I think my answer to that is I don't think we're overhyping AI, but I think we are maybe, not considering just how much work we have to do ourselves to take full advantage of what AI is going to offer for us. So, similar to just automation at large, whether Gen AI is involved or not, if your process isn't thoroughly documented, you're not going to be able to automate it. And I think we're starting as an industry to really feel that same pressure as we begin to explore what Gen AI is going to mean for us.
Yeah, I think we're still in really early days. I know people have said that, and that is true. I think the hype comes in when people start talking about what could happen, what could be, and how fast it's going to come. And so I think that's where the hype can exist. I think we're doing both. I think we're not really offering people helpful use cases to meet them where they're at, and we're overhyping because some of us are so excited about what's possible and what's potentially coming down the pike. Um, but I know from my perspective that there are some things that AI just can't do right now. And then there are also some things that I just cannot believe what I can do right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think at least I can speak for myself that I'm excited about the possibilities of AI, but it can also be completely overwhelming because there are so many different ways to incorporate AI into my day to day, my process personally and professionally. Platforms are saying this is now AI enabled, but what does that mean? There are lots of different LLMs out there, and which one makes most sense for this particular task versus another one. So, I think there can be a little bit of paralysis by just the not knowing where to start piece. But, Summer, you said that there's some things that AI absolutely can't do well right now. I'd be curious to hear some use cases of maybe things that you've tried with AI and you found, oh, we're just not there yet.
Yeah, I mean, there's a limit to context windows right now, right? So there's certain documents I have that are just way too much for the LLMs I have access to today. And then I would say, additionally, when it comes to creative, there's some really exciting and unbelievable strides that have been made specifically in the last few weeks and months, but it's still not there in terms of actually saving time. And again, there's like also that verification gap, the idea of like who is deeming the output good or bad or useful. I think that there's still a lot of work to be done there. So while I may have the capability to do my own creative, is that the creative we're putting out, the creative needs to be putting out the creative. And, from their perspective, from my team's perspective, there's certain places where they can get part of the way, maybe 20% in. But the idea of creative production right now, I'm not seeing that as a reality today. But I do believe it's coming.
Well, Summer, I want to put a spotlight on something you just said as well of it may depend on what you personally have access to. And I think that's where we're feeling some of this tension because we're not just talking about the marketing industry or even the AI business industry. We're also talking about an academic field that's been around since the 50s, right? So sometimes the answer to can AI do this is, well, yes, if you're in a lab at Stanford. So to your point, Summer, a lot of things are coming, but right now it may be paywalled. It may be something that doesn't meet your company's best practices or your governance policy. It may just be something that as an organization you haven't explored yet, but maybe if you broadened your horizons a little bit, you could find a solution. I think you're dead on that creativity is going to be a really common theme in marketing, that we're not going to see AI truly be some sort of magic replacement for human creativity, because that just isn't what it's for. But some of these easy button fixes, so to speak, that we're going to be expecting to see either this year, next year, in the coming years, it's going to be a process of exploration and experimentation.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's such a good point. I forget sometimes that there's so many tools out there, but there are so many tools that I'm not necessarily using, right? And then I think that goes to the point of enablement for our teams. I see AI through a certain lens, but I can't see it through every lens. I love the idea of and the opportunity of sharing what I know with others, and then they go a step further and they may be able to figure something out that I hadn't thought of.
So then, in terms of your use of AI in your day to day for your work, I mean, we've talked a little bit about time saving, certainly, and things that you couldn't have done in your 24-hour day period versus what you can do now. Savannah, I know that you've been evangelizing AI for our company beyond just what a media platform can do. How have you really seen AI make a big difference in your work today?
Yeah, for us at Coegi, I mean, AI is one of those words where I think we really got to get specific with our language, because we're a programmatic agency, right? So on the media side of things, we can talk about AI through the lens of machine learning, to your point, Summer. We've been doing that for 10 years. So it was really easy for us to step into this realm of Gen AI and see it as a complement to how our teams have already been collaborating with algorithms, with machine learning, with programmatic buying. And that has really opened doors for us to, I think, just be more creative in our marketing. So that's been the most exciting part for me, is that entire realm of advertising and marketing and the actual ads themselves were kind of shut off to us before, right? We were really just the team that put ads on the internet at the end of the day, and we didn't get to participate in that conversation. But Gen AI has allowed us to start to experiment a little bit more with our creative agency partners. It's given us a common language to say, hey, you all have a concept. We can maybe help you test it before we even place it into our media platforms. Maybe we're not quite so reliant on what the tech giants tell us is going to work. Maybe we can be a part of that conversation. We can have more of a seat at the table, and we can really bring together that left side of the brain and that right side of the brain and have that sort of shared perspective. That's been really, really different for us these past couple of years.
I think what you're speaking to is the democratization of this, what this tool allows, right? It's no longer in the hands of gatekeepers. And that's what's the most exciting about it, is that if you have an idea, if you want to test something out, it's there for you to do so. And we have to remember, I love that you keep saying Gen AI as to just AI, and you're 100% right, right? I mean, it's an idea that was coined at the Dartmouth conference in like 1957, I think. I don't know if there's a fact check at the end. But what I'm surprised by is that people don't really understand that that's the same technology that's been helping us with our TikTok For You page, or our YouTube recommendations, or Smart Compose. And that transformer technology is what gives us the generative piece of that AI. And I don't think many people understand that. But what's exciting about that is it's generating something new. And it's making these predictions based on all of the training data and all of what we're providing in terms of our context, our ask, our nuance. But I love that now we're able to like simulate these environments from a marketing perspective. I think that's the biggest part of what we're doing right now with AI that has the biggest impact, is being able to make predictions and modeling. That's why it's called a model. We're able to model what could potentially happen and be prepared for those outcomes.
Well, democratizing is the perfect word for what I'm speaking to, because even, as a programmatic agency, right, we can talk about machine learning and the algorithms all day and the strength of what that unlocked for us, but we were still, dependent entirely on what tech giants told us, right? And obviously large language models, these neural networks, they're still a relatively black box to us, but we can do our own experimentation. We can build ourselves tools that are going to solve problems that we specifically have, right? Like I can't call any sort of lab, whether it's in academia or in industry, and say, hey, I have this problem and I only have $12 and I need you to fix it for me, right? But now
$12.
right. That's my budget is $12 for this one specific client problem that is only going to exist for the next 5 minutes. And I just know that there is a way that I can grind it out myself or automate it or approach it with AI. Now we have these tools at our disposal to, create disposable software if we wanted to
Yeah.
and say, okay, I'm just going to crack this code really quickly. And it's allowed us to, deliver better solutions to our clients, be better teammates to each other as well, look at problems from all kinds of different angles that we just never had access to before, even as the, quote unquote tech agency.
Better teammates to each other internally, but also a better teammate to the clients that we work on.
Yep.
And I feel like there's been a lot of appetite from the brands and other agencies that we partner with to explore more about what AI can do for us. I think there's also still some trepidation, as one would expect. There's a lot of unknowns unless you're living and breathing AI like the two of you are. So, scenario in an RFP, brand says, how can I use AI to improve my marketing? Where's the first step the first step you take to really narrow them in to understand how they want to see the benefits of AI? Summer, I'll start with you.
I mean, it goes back to that idea of prediction, right? So I would love, and this is something that we're doing right now for a few brands, is we're starting to make predictions based on their product market fit, what they are going to find as a headwind in the next year, 2 years, 3 years out. How are their consumers changing? As they get into AI, their consumers are also getting to AI. And so they're moving from Google search to having a conversation with ChatGPT. So that opens up the door to not only do you need to continue your SEO strategy, but now you need to have an LLM strategy where you're providing content that the LLM likes, which is inherently different than the keyword solution, right? Large language models like tokens and chunking. And so the content that you're going to have to put out may actually not look that good to a human, and certainly won't help with SEO, but will help you get into those conversations. And so that's something that we're talking about right now is auditing. Let's say that you have a product that's really good for getting tan, and you say to the AI, like, I'm looking for a product that's really good at getting a tan, and your product doesn't come up. That tells you that you're not putting out the right of content for the LLM, what the LLM likes to know. A lot of our websites speak to the SEO strategy, but aren't necessarily speaking to the conversational search strategy.
Yeah, optimizing your content for more of that answer rather than that search result, I think is definitely the lowest hanging fruit. That's the earliest conversation we're having right now. So that's a good practical answer. I'm going to be annoying and give a more theoretical answer, though. I think if people have, how do I use AI in their RFP, they're opening themselves to a level of risk of being taken advantage of by the snake oil that's currently in our industry. There's still quite a bit out there. I think we saw it much more in the past couple of years, like right after that initial launch of ChatGPT. Everybody and their grandmother was suddenly like an AI-enabled agency or an AI-enabled tech vendor. So really, it goes back to that specificity of language. So I want people to be asking more pointed questions, because otherwise you're just going to get a kind of one size fits all, like, well, we'll take care of it for you. You don't have to worry about it, client. And you really want to have more of a journey together, because your whole brand strategy, to Summer's point, is going to have to evolve here. If you've only been thinking about your brand from the perspective of like how it shows up on the SERP and the search engine results and an SEO strategy, you've got a difficult few months coming, especially as we've seen, the utilization in more casual life of things like ChatGPT or Gemini or Perplexity just skyrocket from more of a user perspective. I think we're past the days of just early adoption, and we've seen the reports of everyday users turning to apps on their phones to access ChatGPT over going straight to just searching in their mobile browser.
Savannah, I'm going to put you on the spot. So obviously you have vetted a ton of technology that is AI enabled. What are the types of questions that come first for you to make sure that it feels legitimate and that we're protecting our own data, our clients' data, our thinking, all of that?
This is a great one, but I have to give answers that also protect my own job security.
I
No,
love
I
that.
would say truly, dig a little bit deeper. So ask them, have they licensed a model or have they trained their own? If they have trained their own, ask them questions about it. Just ask to have a conversation with the most technical person in the room. And don't be intimidated by techno babble, right? Like that's a very common strategy that sometimes will get deployed where you'll say, hey, I love talking about AI. Can I have a nerd out session with the person who oversees your technology? See if you can get that conversation and then see how earnest the other person feels. If you're talking to someone who is condescending to you or speaking down to you or just burying things in that jargon that doesn't feel authentic, that's usually my first more human centric warning sign that there's something fishy going on here. You as a person do not need to be an AI expert to smell something a little off in those conversations because the person who's a genuine AI expert is going to be able to break down their technology in a way that's accessible to you as a client. They're going to want to bring you along in that journey. They're going to want you to understand. If they're just smacking you in the face with acronyms and, APIs this and Google this and blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe dig a little bit deeper, maybe call a friend, phone a friend, see if they can take a look at it instead.
That's great advice. That is really good advice. There was one last thing I was thinking about as you were speaking, which is data. If you're a brand and you have data, that's gold right now. They used to say content is king, data is king. Having your own data about your consumer is huge. And additionally, if you're a brand that has to be compliant in any way to any kind of regulatory body, that's another really like low hanging fruit way to do AI is to make sure that you're constantly up to date with your compliance. Like, if you're a food and beverage company, an FDA compliance checker, things like that. But working with your agency and starting to dig in, like Savannah said, to have those conversations with the people that really understand the tech and can explain it to you in a way that you understand is probably going to be the first step.
So I think the data piece is really important. And I feel like a lot of the brands that we work on, they're concerned about the applicability of AI because maybe they're just getting started in their performance marketing or things like that. And I'm sure there are other pieces that brands think that they don't have in place that would prohibit them from really capitalizing on the complete opportunity that AI or Gen AI presents. So, Summer, in your experience, what are some of the top things that you've seen break, quote unquote, when trying to incorporate AI into client work? And what are some quick fixes that brands or marketers can take to be enabled by AI a little quicker?
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever seen anything break at such a high level, but we've definitely trialed and errored in different ways to achieve some information about, where to strategically place an in real life event and at what time and what location and what day and all of that. Really using a lot of data in different places can kind of be more overwhelming than pointing to the right spot. So if we're looking at our demos for our food and beverage companies and we're looking at the retail location and the brand ambassador or the meal prep person, and we're looking at the time that we want to engage. We have a lot of census data and locations. It can get a little overwhelming and it can end up being a little bit more of a solve than we actually need. So going back to the historical data and understanding what you've already done that's been successful is probably the best way for AI to be applied. I think when you add in, what I've seen is when you add in 5 or 6 different places and spaces to the consideration set, it can lose a little bit of its luster.
Perfect. So, going back to our early part of our conversation, I mean, there are certainly limitations of what Gen AI can do in terms of like pure creative production. But I think there are ways that AI can help us be more creative, which is a point I think that Savannah, you brought up. Where does AI really shine for creative thinking? And, where are places where we have to put the human checks and balances so that we're doing right by the marketing of the brands that we work with?
Yeah, I'll certainly preface this just by saying again that I'm not in any way a creative person, but Gen AI has allowed me to start to understand that role a little bit better. I think all of us are creative in our own different ways. When I say I'm not a creative person, I mean literally I can't draw. I'm a great person to invite to Pictionary. We'll have a great time. But my creativity tends to come out more in writing. Like I'm more of a wordsmith. I'm more of that style of a storyteller. So when I am as a media buyer trying to give feedback about a piece of creative, it's hard for me to give feedback that is constructive or actionable without having some sort of in between. And Gen AI has allowed me to say, okay, let me sloppily mock up what I'm trying to tell you because I don't have the actual vocabulary that creative directors or graphic designers would use. And that has allowed us to iterate on ideas so much faster. And to Summer's earlier point about using predictive analytics in this conversation as well, being able to combine all of this past performance data that we have at our fingertips with some of these more creative conversations has allowed us to test and iterate so much faster and so much more efficiently, which ultimately just leads to a better relationship with the client. So that has been where creativity has kind of just been a stepping stone for me. It's certainly not something I do day to day in my career, but it's allowed us to just revisit that, standard old school marketing process of just like the creative person draws something and hands it off to the producer who produces it, et cetera, et cetera. See, I don't even know what happens on the creative side.
Well,
got
you're
it.
a creative person. You're right. I mean, maybe we don't build creatives in-house, but it requires a lot of creative thinking. I mean, up our innovation, you have to be creative thinking to approach that. And Summer, I mean, you've really enveloped your world in experiential, building creative experiential moments so that brands really stand out from a sea of shelves where they're inundated by choices. I would love to see what you think about the role that AI is going to play in building out even more creative experiences for brands and really helping build that relevance and communication with the consumers.
Yeah, I mean, just like what it's doing with software, we can create these experiences that are a lot less hard to achieve in terms of, technology and having an interactive experience on site with a brand. Previously, was a very heavy lift, and it's getting lighter and lighter with each day. But the most exciting part about what AI is doing for experiential is the measurement piece. Up until now, we really had a hard time measuring experiential. I mean, you could say how many people showed up at a place. You might be able to say how many people had a sample, but that was really the limit. Now we can understand from a touch point where people were in the space, how long they lingered there, what was their sentiment when they were there. Did they have a pleasant experience or did they have an unpleasant experience? A lot of data. And now we're starting to do, well, we've done this for a while, but we have a better way of doing it with AI where we're taking information from people, what flavors do they like? Do they enjoy barbecuing or being on the beach? Things like that. And that data is not only useful for that program that we're getting that data for, but it's useful for the brand for an ongoing use case. And so measurement and understanding what's happening for the consumer in an experiential activation is a huge opportunity to prove that ROI to the brands and the brand leaders that haven't always deemed experiential as, just as important as a digital media plant, perhaps. But, as AI becomes more and more ubiquitous in our digital life, I do think that consumers are going to start to seek out those in real life experiences even more. And so that's really exciting about the experiential space right now.
Well, and I love that you've touched on something that even though you were speaking to experiential, it is a bit more universal for marketing and advertising, which is that audience focus. And so that's where certainly from the perspective of planning and just putting ourselves in our audience's shoes, we have a ton of research, we have a ton of data, but now we can engage with it in a much more exciting way, right? Like role playing with a large language model was one of those earliest use cases, I think, for marketers that I'm surprised more people aren't doing regularly. being able to give, let's say, a custom GPT, just for a simple example, what you know about your audience, or maybe what the brand thinks they know about their audience, and then experimenting with how they might react to what you're putting in front of them, whether it's a piece of creative or an experiential activation, or even just, a touch point in general. Maybe we have a consumer journey that we feel really confident in, but in role playing with a large language model, if we're asking them to be that audience for us, they can almost act like a faux focus group, right? We can simulate some of that research that previously would have cost, hundreds of thousands of dollars in some instances, or in any ways just be inaccessible to a lot of smaller brands. So it's been another way for us to also just go back to the basics, but with a new exciting lens.
So I think we're at a place to wrap up, but I always like to leave our listeners with some sort of action item, although I would argue there were many that were dropped throughout this conversation. But I'm sure there are people who are listening who are at different stages in their relationship with AI. Some probably are very nascent and haven't dove in very deep, and then others who have really started to explore, but there's always more to uncover. So Summer, I'd like to start with you. I'd like to hear either a first step somebody should take when exploring AI, or maybe a tool to try, one that you've grown to really value in your day to day.
Yeah, I would say the first step I think, for anyone to start understanding not only what AI can do today, but what the future of AI is going to look like is a deep research project. And it's not that hard. The reason why deep research is so interesting is because it kind of gives you a glimmer of what an agent might be like in the future. What you're doing with deep research, and I suggest you research yourself, and it's really interesting to see what comes up. You would go into a Gemini or a Chat GPT, or a Claude, and then you would say, I want to do deep research. Sometimes there's a toggle, but if you say it may automatically switch to that mode. And then what it'll do is it'll show you what kind of research it's going to do, how it's going to go about it. And it'll ask you if you're good with the plan. And then once you say yes, it'll go ahead and do that plan. That gives you an idea of how an agent is going to start working on our behalf with more high level tasks than just deep research. But I think deep research is cool because it provides you both an easy access. I just want to research dinosaurs, or I want to understand AI, or I want to research myself or my grandmother. Really simple prompting, but you'll see how AI is going to evolve, and eventually we're going to be able to do that kind of agentic workflow for different kinds of use cases, both personally for travel and things like that, but also for business and developing campaigns. I'm curious what Savannah is going to say though.
Yeah, well, I love what you said about trying to find like a personal use case as well, because I think for a lot of people, at least I believe you made this point earlier, they just have a mental block. And that's really understandable if you're only looking at AI through its workplace applications. So my advice would be whatever your hobby is, whether maybe it's knitting, running, cross stitch. I don't know why two of those were fiber arts, considering I don't do any of that. But go to like a subreddit and see like, hey, is there any way someone has used AI to improve their times, or to challenge themselves, or to find something new, and just see what people in more of your like hobby communities are doing. Try to find some way to inspire yourself to experiment with more of that personal touch. And sometimes the light bulbs will start to go off about how they can make your personal everyday work life better too. And then that way you'll be better prepared once we have more of these agentic workflows that we promise are coming. We're working them out right now.
That's right.
I love it. I know AI has helped me in travel itineraries multiple times and recipe adaptation. And what did we do without that? So,
I know.
anyways, thank you so much to you both for being here, sharing your perspectives. And thank you to everyone who is listening. I think that today's conversation made it pretty clear that AI isn't a replacement for marketers, a common fear in the early days, but it's really a tool or multiple tools to amplify what we do best. And so when we pair that speed and that scale with the human creativity and strategy, I think we see a lot of magic happen. So thanks again, everyone. We'll see you next time.